Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good whatever it happens to be to you, wherever you are. And thanks for joining me here on the 20 Minutes as we look back on yesterday's action from the US Open in New York. And there was plenty of action to talk about. Let's start with Cam Norrie. Cam Norrie, of course, won in straight sets yesterday. Let me know what you think about his chances at this tournament. Of course, he could potentially play Rafael Nadal in the quarterfinals should they go on to meet each other. Of course, plenty of tennis to occur between now and then. Nadal obviously winning in straight sets yesterday against Richard Gasquet. That will also be addressed shortly. But of course, Nadal will have to play Francis Tiafoe in the meantime before a potential quarterfinal with his fellow lefty, Cam Norrie. So Cam Norrie, of course, beating Holger Rune yesterday there in straight sets, 7-5, 6-4, 6-1. I think that's a very good win for the Brit, by the way, in such comfortable fashion against a guy whose star in Holger Rune is actually rising this year, I would suggest. Perhaps clay is his best surface, but nevertheless, an impressive win for Cam Norrie, who I believe has actually progressed without dropping a set. I'm sure somebody in the comment section below will let me know if I've got that one wrong. I guess the main highlight, at least on the men's side yesterday, and in terms of the tennis, was the match between Denis Shapovalov and Andrey Rublev. Went to a fifth set tiebreaker. Rublev, of course, though, was serving for the match, but he had a little bit of a wobble. Shapovalov took advantage of that wobble. It was an excellent game, by the way, from the Canadian, who managed to get it back on serve. However, he trailed pretty much throughout the tiebreak, and this time Rublev, when he had a second chance of finishing it off, did so, 10 points to 7. Let me know about Rublev. Are you impressed with that win? Does that suggest that he's going to progress far? Of course, he's now in the fourth round, but do you see him going on to get to, say, the quarterfinals or even further? Or are you concerned that it took him 5 sets to beat Shapovalov, bearing in mind Shapovalov's underwhelming year, shall we say? We all know he had such a run of defeats earlier in the year, although he has sort of had a slight uptick in form. Shapovalov, by the way, did take to Twitter after his result. I know that some people were a little critical about the fact that he didn't manage to win this match in 5 sets, Shapo, but he says huge respect to Andrey. I gave it my all. I actually think probably a little bit more positive we should be about the Canadian, given just how bad his summer was with all those losses and really not making a big impression at Wimbledon either, probably his favoured surface. So he was very complimentary about Rublev, understandably so. I think as well, Shapovalov took the defeat well. We've seen him take some defeats very badly. We all remember what happened in Australia when he smashes his racket on match point. I think that was a slightly different defeat, though, for Shapo, and perhaps he can take some positives from this. But of course, Rublev is the one who progresses. Carlos Alcaraz then, a lovely little image. He was mightily impressive. And I know plenty of observers have been saying just how good he's been playing at the US Open. This wasn't a match I was able to see, so I would love to know your thoughts. Follow us at Talking Tennis TT. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well, and make sure you give this a like button. Either tweet me at Talking Tennis TT, or of course, let me know in the comment section below. Are we getting carried away with our Carlos Alcaraz again? His summer has been, by his exceptional standards that he was setting at the beginning of the year, winning tournaments after tournaments and doing so well. But probably since that French Open defeat to Zverev, has maybe just had a slight dip in form. But is he reclaiming that? And can the teenager win the US Open title and potentially reach world number 1, which would just be insane? Mightily impressive straight sets win there against Brooksby. And by the way, I'm loving his tweets. I've got him on alert because his tweets are very cool, very interesting, just sweet and enjoyable because he's having such a good time. And of course, he had a good time yesterday as he reaches what in Spanish they call octavos, which is the last 16. Of course, there is a potential match for him on the horizon against Jannick Sinner. Jannick Sinner, of course, prevailing in 5 sets yesterday. We'll come to that match as well shortly. Francis Tiafoe, who's Rafael Nadal's next opponent, Also pretty impressive, winning in straight sets. He also took to Twitter to say, let's keep going. Lots of support for him amongst the home crowd. It'll be interesting to see, actually, whether, and let me know what you think in the comment section below, whether you think Tiafoe or Nadal will end up getting more support for that match. We all know how popular Nadal is in New York. Obviously a four-time winner there, going for his fifth US Open major and his 23rd of his career. But Tiafoe as well, big character and very, very popular on the circuit and amongst the crowd. He won yesterday in straight sets against Diego Schwartzman. And yeah, I think Schwartzman, the Argentinian, by the way, actually, I think he's had a reasonably good tournament. Someone who's been in the doldrums, I would suggest, for at least 12 months in many respects. I saw him win in the previous round, was very impressive in that one against Popperin. But he didn't quite have enough. But this was a tight match, 7-6, and it was 9-7 to Tiafoe in that tiebreaker before Tiafoe goes on to win it in straight, 7-6, 6-4, 6-4. Ivashka beating Musetti. Are you as surprised as I am at that result? I fancied the Italian beforehand. Marin Cilic, by the way, beating Daniel Evans. Many people suggesting that they thought Evans would go through. I remember Catherine Whitaker on the tennis podcast was very optimistic about Evans's chances. But actually, Cilic is now into the fourth round. And I believe, and I think it was Vonch on Twitter that said, he has made the fourth round or further at every major this year. So a very impressive year for Cilic. And it could yet get even more impressive, of course. He's still celebrated in a fun style. And also check out Cilic's Twitter account because I think it was fun to see him sort of do a nice little celebration. He's done a few of those this year, and I really like the boy. So that's great. But Dan Evans, maybe a little bit disappointed there to go out in 4 sets. Obviously, the first 2 sets super tight, 2 tiebreakers before Cilic runs it out. 7-6, 6-7, 6-2, 7-5. Let's look at some of the early action on the women's side, beginning with that epic match between Garbiñe, Muguruza, and Petra Kvitová, which went to a super tiebreaker, which Kvitová won 12-10. Absolutely painful for Muguruza. I have to say that when it went to the super tiebreaker, I did fear the worst for the Spaniard. I mean, it was super close. But I do think that sometimes in super tight matches, I remember against Osaka in Australia a couple of years ago. I also remember last year's US Open defeat to Krejcikova. Very tight matches, but tight matches that she lost. Maybe I'm being too harsh on her. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Jessica Pegula continues dispensing of Yu Zhuan there in 3 sets, albeit that it was 6-love in the third. Azarenka, I guess many of us would have predicted her to beat Martic. She did beat her and did so in straight sets. But back to Muguruza. I still think there are some shoots of optimism. It's been a pretty horrid year for the Spaniard. Obviously, she won the WTA finals last year and probably was thinking 2022 is going to be something pretty spectacular. It hasn't turned out that way. She's really rarely been a threat at any tournament, in particular the majors, where she's had some pretty rough defeats. I think she was bageled at Wimbledon, I think, in her defeat there in the second set. But this time, of course, getting to the third round is something. But maybe with someone with so much talent, maybe we should be expecting and hoping for a bit more. Towards the evening's action, we had, of course, in action, we had Rafael Nadal against Richard Gasquet opening on Ash for the evening. Nadal there winning in straight sets, probably to no surprise. But at least for Nadal, his form has started to improve. Obviously, we saw how bad that second or first 2 sets really were against Fognini, both strewn with errors, both sets strewn with errors from both players. But Nadal easing his way through. 6-love in the first set, 6-1. In fact, Nadal won the first 9 games of this match, albeit that the third set was super tight, 7-5. It was actually going with serve, I think, until about 5-all when Nadal got a crucial break before serving it out. So Nadal is just starting to find some form, albeit that he did say in his press conference he still doesn't think he's playing as well as he did earlier in the year. And he made a direct comparison with Australia, where he said at the Australian Open at this stage, he was playing much better, despite having barely played for the previous 6 months. We know he's had one or two injury issues recently, but it was nowhere near that kind of layoff. So he's still maybe scratching for a bit of form, and he will have to find it pretty quickly because I think Francis Tiafoe in the next round will push him. In fact, I was talking to Jack a couple of days ago as we looked towards that potential match, and he said, quietly, let's say, that he really thinks Tiafoe has a very good chance in that match. So let's see. That's really something to look forward to. That will be tomorrow. I would imagine again on Ash, and I imagine again at the peak time, given the popularity of both players. But let's see what the schedulers decide. Jannick Sinner there, by the way, who was given a scare, losing the first set to Brandon Nakashima. By the way, Nakashima, I think his star, a bit like Holger Rune, is definitely rising. He had obviously a very good run at Wimbledon. But Jannick Sinner proving just too good on the day. 4 sets. Sinner, Alcaraz continue for a potential quarterfinal, and that would be very tasty. And whoever would win that could well meet Rafa Nadal in the semi-finals. But once again, I'm probably getting a little bit carried away. Anyway, let me know in the comment section below. What do you think about Nadal? Is he finally finding his form, or is he really going to have to up the ante before playing much bigger fish such as Tiafoe and maybe even Cam Norrie in the quarterfinals? Davidovich Fokina, that's coming up this evening, or it's actually about to get underway very shortly. But we'll talk about today's matches shortly. Just before we go, though, Iga Swiatek also purring. She's through in straight sets. Sabalenka, by the way, wonderful win for her. 6-love, 6-2 against the French woman Clara Burel. Does she have a chance of winning this tournament? Maybe. Bencic also through. Neymar as well. Sorry, Bencic not through. Bencic going out. One of my tips to go far in this tournament, but she was dispatched off in 3 sets by Pliskova. And Danielle Collins. Final word perhaps on her. Has she got a chance? Is she a potential US Open winner? I think so. When we think about how well she did in Australia, hard court major, getting to the final there, and her tennis is electric. And I really love watching the American play. She's obviously been a bit off the scene throughout the rest of the year. In fact, I barely remember I think she's had a few injury issues as well. Certainly missed some of the tour this year, but she's now seemingly back on form. Does she have a chance of winning the US Open? I'm all for it, that's for sure, given the nature of her tennis. I did say I would touch on some of the matches to come. Oh, by the way, before we go, I do want to quickly say something about the Nadal-Gasquet match. So Nadal beating Gasquet for the 18th time in a row. I think it's about 273 years since Gasquet beat Nadal or even took a set off him. And in fact, James Blake here from ESPN, and obviously former tennis player himself, said 17 years ago, I played you, Rafa Nadal, on Arthur Ashe. And now I'm interviewing you because you are still one of, if not the greatest in the world. Incredibly inspiring. Well, it may be 17 years since you played him on Arthur Ashe, James Blake, but it's been more than that since Richard Gasquet beat Rafa Nadal in the juniors before they turned professional. Nice little image there of those two with McKendry on ESPN. Back to today's action anyway. Fokina and Matteo Berrettini about to get underway. I would imagine that Berrettini would be the warm favourite there, particularly the way I thought he was very impressive against Andy Murray in the previous round. Moutet is in the 4th round, and he was a lucky loser. Rude surely should be favourite there. PCB, who's been quietly chugging along, obviously had a very good win in the previous round. And winning that match on a tweener, if I remember rightly, in the early hours. Of course, we were all watching Serena Williams at that time, but he would fancy his chances against Khachanov, particularly how well PCB does in New York or even in North America as a whole. Caroline Garcia against Alison Risk. There's a lot to look forward to there. Can Coco Gauff continue her impressive run before finally tonight or later on this evening, we have Samsonova against Tomljanovic. Probably Samsonova the slight favourite there. Wonder if Tomljanovic may be running on empty after her heroics against Serena Williams. Let me know what you think in the live chat. Let me know what you think in the comments below. All I'll say right now is I think it's been a great US Open so far. I think there's plenty more to come, not least this evening. Make sure you click that like button. Make sure you subscribe. And tennis world, I should say, thanks for stopping by.